So a week ago, I had asked you to ask me some questions and I would answer them. So this is that video. There is going to be a link or a list of all the questions in the description, along with a link to the timestamp they're at, so you can skip to any particular question. And with that, let's get started then. When did you first realize you have been infected with Maico? So this is a long story. So I grew up in the 80s, probably late 80s, I would say, when I got into the dirt bikes and things like that. I mean, when I was younger, I had go-karts and things like that, but I got into ATCs and then dirt bikes. And there was someone who was selling a Maico 250, and some friends of mine were trying to get it. My dad was saying how powerful those bikes were, and that guy, whenever he went to ride it, he came back with dirt all over his back. And I also remember them saying, "Need a new piston," and pistons were like extremely expensive, like $150, which was back then. You have to realize, piston was like $50 or something for like a Japanese bike. So that was the first time I heard of Maico. Some of my friends there, they had bought it and they were riding it around, and it had no kickstarter on it. It was broken off, so it had drift start all the time. My dad was saying how it wasn't running right because it was throwing him off the way he was riding it. It was a 250. The next time I had seen Maico was this guy who had a huge bunch of dirt bikes. He had a garage full of collector bikes. He had completely restored Maicos, like 501, everything like perfect condition. He also had Husqvarnas, like perfect condition. And he had a shed, like 2 floors, just full of dirt bikes, wall to wall, dirt bikes all over his yard, everywhere, dirt bikes, and also a bunch of old cars and stuff. So, and I bought some bikes off him. My friends had bought some bikes off him. I bought the 79 CR125, for example, I had. And one day I go to his place there, and he had this 1981 Maico 490 sitting in his garage, And, I mean, to me, that thing looked badass. I mean, it looked completely, and the seat cover said Dirty Harry on it. So it was this badass looking bike. And found out later he was selling it for $350. No, I didn't have money. I was a high school kid. I had no money. So I was interested. So anyhow, my dad came out and we were looking at it and stuff like that, and they let me ride it. So they couldn't start it. So they had to tow it with a truck to get started. I took it for a ride. And I was scared of it at first, but and then I just started, pegging it, and it wasn't impressive. It was not, I mean, it barely even, skid tire whenever I hit the throttle in the gravel. I could tell it was a decent bike, but I had a CR125, but this wasn't impressing me. I also had TS250 and stuff like that, but this wasn't impressing me. And so whenever I stopped the bike, he stopped me because I was coming by on the road, and I looked down, and I remember I couldn't even see the foot peg after I took my foot off of it. That's how much it was vibrating. And so then we stalled it. He said, "Let's stall it and see if we can start it again." And I tried to kick it over. I couldn't kick it over, And so then he got it and he's kicking it, and it wouldn't start again. He's like, "Well, look, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It needs a new piston. $200. I give you the piston, and I give this bike $200. And my friend was telling me like, "Oh, the crank's probably bent because that's why it's shaking." Meanwhile, just the motor mounts are loose, probably. That was the real issue. But so I didn't buy it. And he said later on, "Oh, you should have bought that bike, that the guy that buys put the new piston in it, and that was all was wrong with it, So, but that was that, and then also during that same time when I was going to buy the bike, which I didn't know at the time, but this other guy came by with these two bikes in the back of his pickup, which were 83 Maico 490 and 82 Maico 490, and it looked badass. They had monoshock and stuff like that, and I was like, wow, I wish that guy was selling his bikes. I didn't know he was selling his bikes for $500 a piece, though. Get $990 money. But so that's where I saw those bikes, and I know I'd seen in Craigslist ad, like an 83 Maico 490 for $400, a little bit after that, and I called the guy up, and he was like, oh yeah, it pulls the front end up every gear and everything, and I had no money to get it, though. At that same time, though, so the guy with the bikes, at the same time I was looking at that bike, his neighbor was out with his bike. His bike against the shit over there. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got my KTM 495. I looked over there. That was also another badass bike. I was like, yeah, that's a fairly badass bike over there. You had to understand this was in the early 90s, so these bikes are still only 10 years old, so they still look like new, And then I went to a place called Neppers, and in Somerset, PA, and they had, I was looking at this, they had an 89 CR 500 that was leaking coolant. I was looking at it. They had started. And then in the attic, they had a 76 Maico 440. I asked them how much they wanted for it. They didn't have a motor in it. They said they wanted $400 for it. Of course, I didn't have any money. So, I make a long story short there. Then, eventually I had gotten a Husqvarna 250. And that bike, got it for a garage door. It's another long story. But that bike was trashed. Had zero compression. Absolutely none. Had a board for the back shocks. They didn't have back shocks. It was like an 80 or an 81 250 CR Husqvarna. It was a badass looking bike, though. It was very unique. I haven't seen that. I hadn't been ever to, being around Japanese bikes. I hadn't seen any of those kept up bikes before. So I eventually got that bike started. I drift started it, got started, rode up the street. I could tell it was probably a good bike. Then I rode into a board broke. But when I took that bike apart, every bearing in that bike was spun. The reeds were open, bad. The carburetor was all bad. The dirty and everything, and the connecting rod was pink in the center from rubbing off the crank. That's how bad the connecting rod was. It didn't have any up and down play, but side to side play, it ran all over the crank. It was completely pink in the middle of it from just rubbing against the crank. And there was a chunk, like that big, missing out top of the piston. Looked like someone put a bolt or something in the side that was too long and just came up and broke the piston, a big piece of chunk of it. But I got the run, so I was impressed by that. So, years later, 2007, got back into dirt biking again. And I had missed the whole 4-stroke, thing. But, so I got back in, I was like, yeah, I'm going to, I was getting divorced. I was like, yeah, I'm going to, I'm here in Oregon. I'm going to do something, ride dirt bikes again. So I was like, I'm going to get all the bikes that I've wanted, So I went and bought a 82 Maico 490 and it was a rip off at the time because the guy said it was rebuilt and everything, and it needed rebuilt. It was all fucked up. So anyhow, I got that bike, and then a couple months later, I seen some ads in Craigslist for CR 500s. So I went out and looked at one. It was 85, which is the one I probably should have gotten. But the guy didn't know anything about it really. He's just like, I was like, how much? What do you mix your oil? He's like, I don't know. And I was like, and then it had the base gasket was off the side of it and pushing out air. So I was like, I'm not sure that I wanted to rebuild this thing. So he's like, oh, you can just put a base gasket. I got a base gasket here. I'm like, it's not the point. I don't know what went into that bottom of that engine with that thing leaking there, But it was a badass looking bike. Looked nice, sounded awesome. But I didn't get it. So then I got this other bike, 86. The guy seemed to know more about what the bike was. He said he mixed it 32-1. He had rebuilt it and everything. No, I did have to rebuild that bike later. That's another story. So anyway, I got that bike, and I, well, when I first test ride it there, I was very impressed with them. It was like light speed, that thing. I was very impressed how powerful that bike was, or how fast it was, how quick it was. And I was like, my Sierra 125 was bigger, And then I saw an ad for KTM 495 for $900 down the street from me. Went and got that. Then I saw an ad for a Husqvarna 500 XC for $500. I went and got that. And then a couple months after that, there used to be these stores that sold, merchandise on eBay for you. And this one was in New Jersey, and they were selling an '83 Maico for $90. And I says, if you show a video of me, or a video of someone riding that bike, in fact, it's still on YouTube, that video. If you put up a video of someone riding that bike, show me that's actually, in good condition, then I'll buy it. So next day, they had a video up of someone riding the bike, and I was like, okay, I bought it. So that time when I said I was very impressed with that Sierra 500, it was only surpassed by the time I started up that Maico 490, just as it got back off the trailer in the back of Lowe's parking lot. I was not in the back of Lowe's parking lot, but in the back of Lowe's, where the docks are. There, they load the stuff into the store. And so he was like, we're on. I was like, I don't know. I was like, so I put it down, kicked it over, just to start right up. I started right around the back of the park right there. I was very impressed. I was like, holy crap, man. The front end just wanted to come up. I mean, it was so powerful. I was way more impressed with that bike. And people came running out of the store. People worked there, like, hey, you want to sell that bike? And he talked to the truck driver. He's like, I don't think he wants to sell it. He's got it. So that was whenever I first became actually impressed with Maico. So then, I rode that bike for a year. Then I rebuilt my Sierra 500, rebuilt the 82, broke both of those. And, the Maicos they were just so much better as far as trail riding and for my type of riding, what I like to do. They have a lot more low-end power, They look cool. The Sierra 500 was just a bigger Sierra 125. It had no power, When I say it had no power, I mean, if I had not ridden a Maico, I would say it had a lot of power. But it was like a narrow power band, just like my Sierra 125. It was such a bigger engine that it automatically had, more low end power, but it didn't really, just because it was a big piston. It wasn't because it had more power. It was just like, it had no traction, no power to the ground really, like the Maicos did. So, but I still liked that bike. I mean, it was hard to get rid of it because I like the way it looks, I like the way it sounds, I like the way it rides. And if I wasn't trail riding it, I would think I would have a lot more fun with it because, if I would have just like wide open fields to ride it in, then it'd be fine. It's just not a trail bike, in my opinion. The Maicos do good everywhere. So whether you're flying out in the field or whether you're gonna ride the trails, and so that was whenever I started getting bit by the Maico, and then eventually, the Husqvarna sucked, absolutely terrible. The KTM, the power was good, but the handling was terrible, absolutely horrid, and the complexity of the engine was horrible. Getting parts was horrible. It's expensive. They're hard to find, and they're all screwed up. The bike itself was rotting in the cases. It wasn't just not built that well. It wasn't good materials. And so that's why I got rid of the KTM. And again, at the time, I also wanted the KTM. I wanted 89 KTM 500, wanted the 550s, I wanted everything. And then just ended up, after a couple of years of these bikes, just going towards the Maico. Now, it's not that I still wouldn't want those, but I more wanted the Maicos after that. And so then I changed my mind. And instead of collecting every single big bore of all the different companies, I just started collecting big bores of all the Maicos. Well, I just wanted to express how much I've enjoyed your history of Maico videos. Well, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed them. Sometimes it takes a long time to go through and find all this information because I like to track everything down with a lot of my videos. And sometimes I don't get it right, because you don't know how far to go back, or you don't know where to stop. So sometimes I research, like, when I did the history of dirt bike, or the history of dirt bikes or whatever, that series I did, dirt bike history videos, I would research who did the first what, who made this or who made that. And, sometimes you'd hit something, like if you search for who made reeds, for example, you hit like 20 years ago, these guys made something. And you can accidentally think to stop there, but that's not where reeds were invented. 20 years ago isn't that long ago, but they just improved some kind of plastic cage for them or something. So you got to keep going back and back. So sometimes tracking down, because I don't like to just say, okay, yeah, this part was here or this was done here. I like to, go back and figure it and find what the truth is. And a lot of times websites don't have the truth, or they mess things up. And so I usually also like to have multiple sources for something. Like for the longest time, the only source I had of Maico being sabotaged or having gearbox problems in '83 was only Super Hunky's article, until I found a news article by Cycle News. So always keep looking for things. If you were in the market for a brand new dirt bike, what would you choose and why? So this is a hard question or not a hard question, but it's a strange question, because I'm always in the market for a new dirt bike. For example, whenever I went and bought that bike there, that's the 2015 Maico 685, 700. So I bought that bike, it was $8,000. Plus $2,000 about in shipping, so about $10,000. I bought that bike. So right after I bought that bike, a couple weeks later, the guy with this bike here, which is the Maico 620, Pete in New York, he's like, I want to sell this bike to you. I was like, well, how much? He's like, well, $5,500. I was like, okay. So then I bought this bike. So I'm always in the market for a new bike. So while I'm in the market for a new bike, what would I get? Well, I'm going to get a 1986. What would I get? With 1986 Maico 500 air cooled is one that I don't have. So that's kind of interesting to me. Also, any 90s Maico, pretty much, or late 80s after 86. But particularly one bike I don't have would be the Maico 545. Which is only like 3 of them in the U.S. I know who has one, but yeah. So Maico 545 would be one, and another one. If it came back on the market, there was one in the UK that was a dual cylinder sidecar, 660. I think it was 660 dual cylinder sidecar. So it was like 2. Or 640, I think it was. It was like 2 320s, dual cylinder. So I'd probably get that and build something out of it. Those are 2 I'll think of, but I don't think it's what you're actually asking. I think you're asking if I was in the market for a new bike. Again, when I was in the market for a new bike, I got a new bike, right? I got a Maico 700 from Maico. So if I was in the market for a new bike, didn't have any, I would get a Maico, Maico 500 brand new. Or 620 or 685. But I think you're asking about the other brands. And here's the thing, if I wanted one of the other brands, I would just go out and buy one, So that's why it's a harder question for me to answer, so when you have Beta, Husaberg, I don't know if they still make 2-strokes. There's TM, there's Sherco, there's Beta, KTM, and then Husqvarna, which is just a KTM. I'd go for the Husqvarna, just because it's everybody and their mother has a KTM, and it's the same bike, just with different look. Kind of looks a little cooler, I think. But I guess probably that. But yeah, really, I would buy. And when I'm done buying Maicos, I would go on to another big bore. So, and that's pretty much what it is. I mean, I would just look at it and see which ones are doing pretty good. And I've heard decent thing about Beta. I've actually ridden one, but I think that yeah, I would probably still go with Husqvarna. What brand would you use for a replacement piston if you were to melt one or otherwise have to get a new one? So first, whenever I read this before, I read it wrong. I thought that he was asking me, what brand of piston would I buy to melt down to make a piston for my Maico? But no, he's asking what brand would I use. So a top brand I would get would be Malle. That's the original piston, but they're more expensive. They're like $500 for a piston. I actually did get one cheaper than that for my 2005 when it was rebuilt. So I would get that. I think I actually ended up with a Costa or my 440, but those ones, that's a replica of a Maico, of a Malle piston. But Malle would be my top choice. Next time I would get a piston. Now, the other two I would use would be Wassinger or Wiseco. And if you look at all the bikes that I have, they either have one of those 4 pistons. So I believe the 440 has a Costa, which is a Malle replica. But all my other bikes either have a Malle, or they have a Wiseco, or they have a Wassinger, or Wassinger, whatever it is. So those are the ones that I would get. So some of the ones that I bought and didn't rebuilt, definitely they have Malles in them, most of them. So the 83 has a Wiseco in it, and the 86 has a Wassner in it. These guys are all original, so they have Malles. That's a Malle, 660s, a Malle. The 2005 Maico is a Malle. Wiseco is also in the 82. So those are what I would get: Malle, Wassinger, or Wiseco, whichever I could get. And probably, I'm not sure which I would choose. Malle would be my first choice, but what would I choose over Wassner or Wiseco is, I'm not sure what I would choose over those two. I know you've said it many times in the past where to go to find a complete new or used engines, but I've tried them all and still cannot find a new or used Maico or Zabel, or as it's known 700. Please copy and paste a link right to the place and find an engine at last. Okay. So I'm going to paste some links below, but under this questions thing, time mark, I'll paste the links. But you can call Zabel. You email Zabel, right? And that's how I got my Zabel engine. But they do have them listed on the website sometimes. They have new engines for Maico, or Zabel is going to cost you, $5,000 or so. I got this engine for $2,500. That was used engine. Now I've also sometimes on Facebook, people post Zabel engines for sale. I have another one I got for like $1,500, and he's already built and everything. And Zabel parts are expensive, so I'll link that, and you can also contact if you're just looking for a motor. South Cal Maico. You may be able to contact him. He may have a motor and be able to get you one for any year or different years Maicos, whatever he has, or you can get a hold of, or even a whole bike. Be able to help you out with that. So I'll link those if you're just looking for a motor. I've wondered for a while actually if it's possible to change the chain on an 81 Maico 490 with only basic tools, or is it better to buy a more recent one like 83 or 84? Last question: do you know why the Maico had that wide power band? If yes, is it possible to make a 2-stroke almost run like a 4-stroke? So the first question is that when I originally put my Maico back together, the 82, I actually had the motor out, and I used a press to press in the clutch. I mean, the main thing that you have to, the main problems you have with the fixing the Maico up. The first one is being able to tighten the crank bolt while holding in the crank in place, right? Without, because you can't really, you don't want to put any stress on the chain. Second one is taking off and on the clutch and bolting it on. So for the putting on the crank gear, you can just use an impact drill, and you may have to put stress on the connecting rod by putting a bar through it, and having it sit on the bolts. That's one way to do it. Another way is to see if you can put a holder on like the magneto side or something like that. How I've done it was I did put a bar through the connecting rod, and it worked out fine. For the clutch, you just have to go and find some kind of clamp, like a 3-way clamp, has 3 prongs on or something like that, and have it so it will go underneath the clutch, and then you can push in the center. So that's what you're going to have to get, is some kind of clamp like that from the store. And as far as a clutch holder, there used to be clutch holder tools on eBay for like $10. So, and I believe if you go to South Cal Maico, and I believe if you go to South Cal Maico, he actually sells some of those tools anyways, so you can get them from there. But yeah, those are the main things you got to figure out how to do. Holding the crank, pushing in the clutch, because it's just a bunch of. By the way, never get the spring. The springs don't work. You've got to get the bevel washers, and then the crank, the clutch holder. So you can do it fairly easily, I would say. Again, with the crank, you gotta be careful. I mean, you can also hold it with the chain. That's another way. You put stress on a little bit. You can also put it on a bad chain and hold it that way. I've done that to put the crank bolt on. I mean, that's the main thing. But otherwise, yeah, you can get some kind of clamp, like a 3-way clamp that'll go over it and push it in. And the other thing is just the clutch holder that you can. It's mostly just a clutch plate, or something that's shaped like a clutch plate. It has a little handle on it. So those are the main tools you would need. And like I said, you can get those. Something you can get from the hardware store. The clutch holder, no, maybe eBay or something. But yeah, like I said, South Cal Maico, I think, has them. Now, why did Maico have that wide power band? I used to thought I knew. Most of it's in the porting and how they made the bike, and how they ported everything and how it was done. But I used to think that they had heavy cranks. Because if you want to tame a CR500, you put a heavy flywheel on it, right? You put a heavy flywheel on it, and it's supposed to tame it more. Now, of course, you're going to put more stress on that ball bearing. Maicos don't have ball bearing in the crank. They have roller bearings. But that doesn't make too much sense for the Maico. Because, first of all, you don't need to put, some of these bikes, they only had an inner rotor, like a small inner rotor. In fact, I can get you one here. So a lot of the Maicos that I go putting up the hill with, they just had something like this on it. This is all their crank was. It's just little inner rotor. And so people was like, oh, they have a big flywheel? Like, no, they don't, but they still pull. And then I was like, well, maybe the crank's heavier. And I know that they reduced the weight from 82 to 83. 83 is a lighter crank, so it rubs up faster. But so anyhow, I had some guy online, John Letty. I was like, how much does your CR500 crank weigh? And I remember he said how much it was. And then I came in my garage and I weighed my 2005 crank at the time, a couple years ago, and it was lighter. I was like, huh. I always thought the CR500 crank was lighter, but it's not. So some of it has to do with maybe how they weight them, because CR500 cranks a little bit weighted weird because they have the hollow. But yeah, they're actually, at least whenever he told me his weight, that was heavier. Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how they do it. It's just the porting, I guess, how they do it, how they port it, how they, the shape of the dome and everything else that they've done. Can you make a 4-stroke or a 2-stroke like a 4-stroke? Well, so can you make a 2-stroke like a 4-stroke? I mean, you can get close. I mean, it's not going to be exactly the same. I mean, 2-strokes still 2-strokes. I mean, you can tune them down with the flywheel weight, make them, more tame. Mostly you're looking at getting them to run off the bottom, which Maicos already do. But then have no top end, have just a smooth top end. Maicos still have not smooth top end. I mean, they're still, what I mean by smooth, just, it's putting. No, they still take off like a 2-stroke. So, but I mean, some older enduro bikes and stuff like that have similar. I mean, but they're just going to run different, and in the end, because I mean the 4-stroke's like a polite motor, right? It's like, okay, please give me some gas now. May I have some gas? He's like, okay, thanks for the gas. And he's like, okay, may I have some spark? Get some spark. Okay, now I've got a fart. That's pretty much what it is. And it's just this very slow thing where 2-strokes more like, gas spark, throw up, gas spark, boom, basket, boom. It's like, every single stroke is firing. Whereas it's not with a 4-stroke, it's more, they're not firing every single time, so you can definitely tell that sometimes, if you're going really slow on a 4-stroke, trying to go up a hill and you're going down to the idle, you can kind of feel it just pushing every other time until it stalls, so yeah, I mean, you can tune it, and get it close, and you can make a 2-stroke more mellow, sure. There's a lot of 2-strokes that are more mellow, but I guess it really means what you're looking for as far as because a lot of people, a lot of the 2-strokes have been tuned for top end, for the race bikes, but you can tune them for low end too.